I still remember the sound of their laughter as the SUV pulled away. The tires spat gravel against my legs. The summer sun scorched the back of my neck, and my chest hollowed out like someone had carved it empty. "Ethan!" I shouted, running after them, waving my arms like a fool. "Ethan!" But the laughter only grew louder. Mark and Riley, his cousins, had their heads stuck out of the back windows, holding up their phones, filming me as if I were part of some ridiculous comedy skit. I heard Riley's voice cutting through the wind. "Good luck. Claire, see you in 200 miles. The gas station sat in the middle of nowhere. A lonely pump, a flickering sign, and a bathroom that smelled of bleach and mildew. My phone had 1 bar left. My wallet and charger were still in the SUV. I had run inside to buy Ethan an energy drink he had asked so sweetly. Said he was too tired to walk in himself. And when I came back out, they were gone. At first, I waited. 5 minutes. Then 20. An hour. I kept glancing at the bend in the road, certain they'd come back, laughing and clapping each other on the back, telling me I should learn to take a joke. Ethan had pulled plenty of stupid stunts before, but never this. Never something so cruel. Finally, my phone buzzed. One text. "Don't be mad. Babe. Just a prank. Well, be back soon." Then the screen went black. Dead. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. My throat felt dry as dust. My hands shook as I sat down on the curb, trying to pretend I wasn't scared. But I was. That was the moment the truth settled over me. Not like lightning, but like a slow fever that had been burning for years. This wasn't a joke. This was who Ethan was. Who he had always been. I thought of the pranks I'd swallowed over the years. The morning of my job interview when my keys disappeared and Riley filmed me tearing apart the house in panic. The time mark replaced the candles on my birthday cake with sparklers that burned my hair. The night Ethan poured ice water over me in bed just to get a laugh. They called it fun. I called it cruelty. But I smiled anyway. Because if I didn't, I was too sensitive. And now, here I was, stranded in the middle of nowhere with no phone. No wallet. No ride. Just their laughter echoing in my ears. A woman pulled into the station. Her minivan stuffed with toys and grocery bags. 2 kids pressed their faces to the windows. She looked at me, sweaty and scared, clutching a half-empty bottle of water. "You okay? Honey?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "I will be," I said. My voice didn't tremble this time. Because in that blistering moment, I knew something with a terrible, quiet certainty. I wasn't going to wait. Not for Ethan. Not for anyone. The woman with the minivan introduced herself as Karen. She looked at me with the kind of eyes that instantly knew something was wrong, but didn't push for details. She handed me a small bottle of juice from the front seat. "Where are you headed?" she asked gently. "Anywhere north," I whispered. My throat still felt raw. She nodded, told her kids to scoot over, and opened the passenger door. "I can take you as far as Brookfield. There's a bus station there. You'll be safer than out here." I slid into the seat, clutching the cold juice like it was an anchor. For the first time that day, I felt a sliver of relief. As the minivan pulled back onto the highway, I watched the gas station shrink in the rearview mirror until it was nothing but a dot against the horizon. The ride was quiet. Karen chatted lightly with her kids, turning back now and then to check on me. I stared out the window, the dry fields rolling past, trying not to think of Ethan's smirk or Mark and Riley's laughter. My hands were steady now. My heart wasn't racing. It was as if something inside me had finally snapped back into place. We reached Brookfield just after sunset. Karen pulled into the bus station parking lot and killed the engine. She turned toward me with a look that was both firm and kind. "You're stronger than you think," she said, pressing a $10 bill into my hand. "Get yourself something to eat." I wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, I just nodded, my voice low. "Thank you. For everything." She smiled. And then she was gone, swallowed into the stream of traffic with her kids waving from the back seat. The bus station was old, with flickering lights and benches that smelled faintly of mildew. I sat there with the $10 bill in my pocket and a phone that was nothing more than a dead weight. That was when I remembered Uncle David. I hadn't spoken to him in years. After my mother died, the family drifted apart. But he was always the quiet one, the steady one. A retired teacher who lived by the coast. The last time we spoke, he had said something simple: "You'll always have a place with me." With shaky fingers, I borrowed a charger from the station clerk and powered my phone for just a few minutes, long enough to send a single message. "Can I come stay with you for a while? I don't know where else to go." The reply came within seconds, like he had been waiting. "Always. Come home." That night, I bought a one-way ticket with the cash I had hidden away years before, just small bills tucked into a separate account under my mother's maiden name. Money Ethan never knew about. I had never intended to use it. Not really. But something in me must have known, long ago, that I'd need it. The bus ride took all night. I leaned my head against the window, watching the streetlights blur into golden streaks. I didn't sleep. I just kept breathing, steady and quiet, as if each mile was scrubbing the laughter out of my ears. By morning, the air smelled different, salty and clean. Pine trees lined the highway, and in the distance I glimpsed the shimmer of the ocean. When the bus finally pulled into the small coastal town, my chest tightened. There he was, Uncle David, standing in a worn denim jacket, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his smile exactly the same. I stepped off the bus, my legs unsteady, my eyes burning, though I still refused to cry. He opened his arms, and for the first time in years, I let myself fall into an embrace that asked for nothing in return. "Let's get you inside." "Claire," he said softly, "you're safe now." That night, in his small house with chipped white fences and flower beds that looked like something out of an old movie, I took the longest shower of my life. I scrubbed until my skin stung, until the dust and sweat and years of humiliation swirled down the drain. When I looked in the mirror afterward, wrapped in a towel, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Tired, hollow-eyed, but alive. And somewhere deep inside, a new voice whispered, "You are not going back." The cafe where I worked wasn't much faded booths, sticky menus, and an old jukebox that only played half its songs without skipping. But it gave me purpose. And for a while that was enough. The customers were kind. And Mrs. Carter, the owner, paid me in cash at the end of every shift. I could disappear into the rhythm, pour coffee, Take orders. Wipe tables. Routine steadied me. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon. The air outside smelled of salt, and gulls circled the harbor. I was refilling the napkin holders when the door swung open so hard it slammed against the wall. A man stumbled in. He was tall, rough around the edges. His shirt soaked in crimson. Blood. For a moment I thought it was some cruel joke. That word still haunted me. But then I saw his eyes. Wild. Pained. Desperate. "Help," he gasped, before collapsing near the counter. Time froze. The jukebox cut out. Mrs. Bretter. Carter dropped the mug she was drying, ceramic shattering against the floor. My body moved before my mind caught up. I rushed to him, pressing my hand to the wound at his side. My fingers came away slick and red. "Stay with me," I whispered, grabbing a clean towel and pressing it hard against the bleeding. "You're going to be okay." "Mrs. Gill." Carter fumbled with the phone, dialing 911. Her voice shaking as she relayed our address. I kept talking to him. Steady. Low. The way my mother used to when I was sick as a child. His breathing hitched. Shallow and ragged. His hand shot up suddenly and clutched my wrist with surprising strength. His gaze locked on mine, storm-gray eyes filled with both terror and resolve. "Don't let me die," he rasped. "You're not dying here," I said firmly, though my heart was pounding so loud it drowned out my thoughts. The sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Minutes later, paramedics stormed inside, working fast, lifting him onto a stretcher. He never broke eye contact with me until the doors closed and they wheeled him away. When silence finally returned, my knees gave out. I sat on the cafe floor, hands shaking, blood staining my apron. "Claire." "Mrs. Pose," Carter murmured, laying a trembling hand on my shoulder. "You saved him." But I didn't feel like a savior. I felt cracked open, raw, unsettled. The smell of iron clung to me even after I scrubbed my hands raw in the sink. I told myself I would never see him again. He was just a stranger who had stumbled into my world. But 3 days later, the bell above the cafe door jingled again. It was him, bruised, stitched, limping but alive. He slid into a booth near the window, like any other customer, and asked quietly for coffee. When I brought it to him, he looked up with those same storm-gray eyes and gave me a small plush, grateful smile. "Thank you," he said softly, "for saving my life." And just like that, the stranger was no longer a stranger. The autumn storms rolled in hard on the coast, the kind that turned the sky into bruised steel and made the waves slam against the breakwater like fists. One night, after the cafe closed early, I walked home with my coat pulled tight, rain already soaking the edges of my sleeves. When I reached Uncle David's porch, a shadow moved on the steps. My breath caught. For a heartbeat, I thought it was Ethan that, somehow he had found me already. But when the figure lifted his head, it was Caleb, his hair plastered to his forehead, jacket drenched, his eyes shadowed with something heavier than the storm. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. His voice was low, raw. I hesitated, then opened the door. Uncle David was away at his church group. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and the bread he had baked earlier. I handed Caleb a towel and put a kettle on the stove. We sat at the kitchen table, the storm rattling the windows, silence stretching between us. For a long while he only stared at his hands. Then he spoke. "I used to be a federal investigator," he said, words dropping like stones into the quiet. "Narcotics division. I got too close to something I wasn't supposed to. My partner, he was dirty. Sold me out." I leaned forward, pulse quickening. He kept going. His voice clipped, almost clinical. "They staged it as a botched drug bust. Left me bleeding in an alley. I should have died that night. But I didn't fret. And when I crawled out, I realized everything was gone, my badge. My name. My apartment. All of it." He finally looked at me then, storm gray eyes glinting in the dim light. So I disappeared. Figured it was safer that way. Safer for anyone near me, too. I didn't know what to say. My chest ached with the weight of it. He wasn't just a man who wandered into the cafe. He was another soul burned by betrayal, running from ghosts that refused to stay buried. "Sounds like you needed somewhere quiet," I said softly. He gave the faintest nod. "Yeah. Somewhere no one would find me." We didn't talk after that. The kettle whistled. I poured the tea. We sat, listening to the storm roar outside, the rain pounding against the roof like it wanted in. When it grew late, I brought him a blanket and a pillow. He stretched out on the couch. As I turned to leave, his hand brushed mine. Gentle. Brief. "Thank you, Claire," he murmured. "For everything." I went to bed with my heart racing. The storm still raging outside, and a new kind of storm beginning inside me. The break-in happened on a Thursday afternoon. Uncle David and I had just come back from the market when we noticed the front door slightly ajar. A draft slipped through the crack, carrying with it the faint smell of damp earth. "Stay here," David whispered. But I followed anyway, my heart thudding in my ears. The living room looked untouched, the television still covered in a thin film of dust. But in the kitchen, one drawer was open, the one where David kept a small roll of emergency cash and some old letters. The bills were scattered across the counter. Not taken. Just disturbed. As if someone had wanted us to know they'd been here. Caleb arrived within minutes. I hadn't even realized I'd dialed his number until he came barreling through the door. Eyes scanning every corner. He checked the locks, the windows, even the garden gate. "This wasn't random," he muttered, jaw tight. "Someone wanted to rattle you." "Me?" I asked, but he didn't answer. That night, Caleb installed new locks on the doors and a small camera over the porch. He left a heavy flashlight by the entry table. His movements calm but clipped, like muscle memory. Uncle David tried to keep things light. While folding laundry, he glanced at me and said, "Sometimes the people we run from don't chase us because they want us back. They chase us because they lost control." His words sank deep, settling like stones in my chest. The next day at the cafe, I overheard two dock workers talking at the counter. "You see that video? The gas station prank? Went viral again." Whole comments section tearing those guys apart. My hand froze midair, the coffee pot trembling. "They thought it was hilarious," the other said. "But people online? Nah, they're furious." Can't believe anyone would leave a woman stranded like that. I backed away, my pulse quickening. They didn't know it was me. Not yet. But the past I had tried to bury was bubbling to the surface. Carried on the careless words of strangers. That night, I sat on the porch, staring out at the darkened street. Every sound made me flinch: the crunch of gravel, the rustle of branches. Caleb sat nearby, his eyes always scanning, steady but alert. "You're safe," he said quietly. I wanted to believe him, but the truth pressed in from all sides. Ethan still existed. Mark and Riley were still out there. And now, the world knew their story. Sooner or later, they would come looking for me. It happened at dusk, when the sky was painted in bruised purple and the air smelled of rain-soaked leaves. I was clearing dishes with Uncle David when a knock rattled the front door. Slow, deliberate. I froze. David glanced at me, worry etched across his face. Caleb was already on his feet, moving silently toward the door. When I pulled it open, my breath caught. Ethan stood on the porch. He looked different, leaner, almost gaunt. His once perfect hair hung longer, and shadows carved deep beneath his eyes. He raised his hands like he was approaching a wild animal. "Claire," he said softly. "Please. Can we talk?" The name hit me like a slap. He hadn't spoken it in 5 years. Not since the day he left me stranded with nothing but a text calling it a prank. My knees wanted to buckle. But Caleb stepped forward, calm and immovable, putting himself between us. "Who are you?" Caleb asked, voice steady but edged with steel. "I am her husband." Ethan replied quickly. "No," I said, stepping out from behind Caleb, my voice steady. "You were my husband?" "Not anymore." Ethan's gaze darted between us. "Just 5 minutes. Claire. That's all I am asking." Caleb's eyes met mine. A silent question. I gave the smallest nod. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. The wind carried the tang of salt from the ocean. Ethan shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, staring at the ground. "I've been looking for you," he murmured. "Ever since the video." Mark and Riley told the story on their podcast. It went viral. People were furious. I watched it and I couldn't breathe. I left them. Have been trying to make things right ever since. His voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw shame on his face. "Why now?" I asked, arms crossed tight. "Because I couldn't carry it anymore," he whispered. "What I did. What they did. It haunts me." I let the silence stretch. Then I said the words that had lived in me for years. "You didn't just lose me at that gas station. You lost me long before every time you laughed when I was the punchline." His face crumpled. "You lost me," I continued, "because you never really saw me." At that moment, the door opened behind me. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, quiet, protective, steady as stone. Ethan's eyes flicked to him. "Who is he?" I didn't hesitate. "My fiancé." Ethan's jaw tightened, the fight draining from his shoulders. He looked down at the steps, then back at me. "I guess I deserve that," he whispered. "You do," I replied softly. The mist thickened, swallowing him as he turned and walked down the path. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. 6 months later, the courthouse smelled faintly of polish and dust. The kind of place where truth and lies tangled in the same stale air. My heels clicked against the marble floor as Caleb walked beside me, his hand steady at the small of my back. Reporters swarmed near the entrance, cameras flashing like lightning. Inside, Mark and Riley sat at the defense table. Gone were their cocky grins and swagger. They wore matching dark suits, collars too stiff, their hands twitching as they shuffled papers. They looked smaller than I remembered, like overgrown boys caught sneaking out after curfew. Their latest prank had crossed a line too sharp to ignore. They had rigged a coworker's office with hidden cameras, shaving cream bombs, and fake eviction notices. The young woman, humiliated in front of her colleagues, collapsed from the panic and seized on the floor. She almost died. And this time, the world had not laughed. The internet turned savage. Sponsors cut ties, and the district attorney brought charges. And because their fame had been built on cruelty. My story, the gas station prank, surfaced as the starting point. Ethan sat behind them. Not at the table, but close enough to be pulled into the wreckage. He looked hollow. Eyes fixed on the floor. Shoulders bent beneath invisible weight. When my name was called, I walked to the stand. My pulse raced, but my voice, when it came, was clear. "Tell us what happened that day," the prosecutor said. So I did. I described the heat of the asphalt, the dust in my shoes, the sting in my throat as I screamed Ethan's name. I described waiting, hour after hour, with no phone, no wallet, no way home. But I didn't stop there. I told them about the years before the missing keys, before my interview, the ruined dress, the buckets of ice water in the night. I told them how every prank chipped away at me until I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. They called it fun, I said, my voice tightening. But it wasn't. It was cruelty dressed as comedy. And the laughter hurt more than the tricks. Because each laugh told me I didn't matter. That my pain was entertainment. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Mark shifted in his chair, his jaw tight. Riley stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. And when they left me at that gas station, I continued. Something inside me broke. Or maybe it finally healed. Because that was the day I realized I wasn't going back. Not to them. Not to any of it. My throat burned. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that. The prosecutor nodded. Thank you. Imzess. Adams. When I stepped down, Caleb was waiting near the aisle. His eyes steady. Protective. He didn't need to say anything. His presence said it all. As we walked out, Ethan's eyes lifted for the first time. For a moment, I saw the man I once thought I loved, his gaze full of regret. Maybe even longing. But then his stare flicked to Caleb, solid and sure at my side, and Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't rise. He didn't call out. He just watched as I walked past him. My head high, my steps certain. Outside, the cameras exploded again. Questions flying through the air. I ignored them. Caleb slipped his hand into mine, and together we descended the courthouse steps. Behind us, Mark and Riley were left to face their verdicts, their empire of mockery crumbling in the same spotlight that once crowned them kings. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a witness to my own survival. 6 months passed, and the world outside the courthouse faded into something quieter. The cafe still smelled of coffee and old wood. The harbor gulls still cried in the mornings, and life found a new rhythm. I wore no disguise anymore. I was simply Claire Morgan, now no longer hiding, no longer waiting for footsteps behind me. My shifts at the cafe turned into laughter with regulars, late-night walks with Caleb, and evenings spent with Uncle David on the porch, sipping tea as the ocean breathed in the distance. One morning, I found the old bus ticket tucked inside a drawer. The paper was worn thin, edges curled, ink fading. I held it gently, realizing it wasn't a reminder of fear but a symbol of the moment I chose myself. I slid it back, not out of shame but gratitude. Ethan tried once more to reach me. He appeared at the cafe one afternoon, his shoulders slumped, his voice soft. "I'll regret it for the rest of my life," he said, holding out a photo from our honeymoon. I didn't take it. "I am not that woman anymore," I told him. "And you're not that man." He nodded, tears brimming, and left without another word. That night, Caleb handed me a mug of tea on the porch. He didn't ask about Ethan. He didn't need to. He only slipped his hand into mine. Steady, grounding, real. The sea stretched before us, endless and alive. I leaned into Caleb's shoulder, breathing deep. For years, my life had been a stage for someone else's laughter. But here, in this small town with its chipped fences and salt-stained air, I finally understood something simple and profound. I wasn't the punchline anymore. I was the author. I used to believe love meant enduring, even when it hurt. I told myself, if I laughed at the jokes, if I stayed quiet through the humiliation, it meant I was strong. But the truth is, strength is not about swallowing pain. It's about refusing to live where you're not respected. That day at the gas station, abandoned under the hot sun, I realized no apology could erase the pattern of cruelty I had accepted for too long. Walking away saved me. Starting over gave me back my voice. And meeting Caleb reminded me that love isn't loud or cruel. It is steady, quiet, and safe. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: you don't have to stay where you are diminished. You are allowed to leave, rebuild, and find peace. What about you? What lesson do you see in this story? And where are you watching from?